Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Council 2019 Day 2 of the Rate and Capital Budget Meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised, and for those in attendance, I would ask that you ensure that your phones are on silent mode. Budget meetings are always a little less formal than regular council meetings, so historically we have not required members to stand when speaking. If there are concerns with this informality, I'd be happy to entertain them now. We will, however, be requiring a mover and seconder for each motion passed. At this time, I'll ask, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I don't believe we need to approve the agenda at this point because it already was approved. And I don't even have it. Sorry, my apologies. Okay, so the next we're going to have a deputation by Wade Mclean. So if you could come forward, sir. Oh, that's okay. My fault. Just to let you know, you have 10 minutes for your presentation, and so I'll give you a 1 minute heads up at the end. I moved it back.
Good morning. Of course, this doesn't work now. This doesn't work. Sorry. I got it. I have the most over here. All right. Good morning. In Shel Silverstein's poem, Where the Sidewalk Ends, he writes about a place where children are free to walk and carry on without worry. Unfortunately for my family and my fellow neighbors in the Pine Ridge Estate subdivision, where the sidewalk ends for us is a very dangerous and precarious place. Good morning, Mayor Chop, Norfolk Council members, and distinguished guests. My name is Wade Mclean, and together with my wife Jessica, we've been raising our 2 children in the subdivision known as Pine Ridge Estates since 2013 when we moved to Port Dover. For those of you who are not familiar, our subdivision consists of 4 streets and approximately 130 houses that is located at the busy intersection of Cockshut and Dover Mills Road. Sorry, half of it's not up there. I'm here today to request the construction of a sidewalk that will connect our subdivision to the neighboring communities, which would provide a safe means of travel for my family and fellow neighbors. Sorry, there's supposed to be pictures up there. Yeah, nothing's working. Sorry. I can try and load the other presentation that wasn't sent by email, but there's that option.
If you want to take a minute, sure, no problem.
Sorry. Okay. So for those of you who are not familiar, our subdivision consists of 4 streets and approximately 130 houses and is located at the busy intersection of Cockshut and Dover Mills Road. I'm here today to request the construction of a sidewalk that will connect our subdivision to the neighboring community, which will provide a safe means of travel for my family and fellow neighbors. We are a young family who over the past several years have begun to feel more isolated from many parts of our wonderful town. As you can see on the map, we are essentially cut off from surrounding neighborhoods due to the fact that we are without a sidewalk and absolutely have no safe means of travel from our subdivision to the rest of Port Dover. As a young and physically active family, we take pride in our environment and make a conscious effort to reduce our carbon footprint. We still often find ourselves driving to an area closer to parks or downtown to begin our lengthy walks, simply because there is not a safe road to travel by foot. These concerns are echoed by many of our fellow residents who also feel confined to the area. Those who are determined to leave our subdivision on foot and head towards our downtown, they must travel on the uneven gravel shoulder of Cockshut or along the narrow road of Dover Mills. People continue to use these routes even in the winter when snow is pushed to the edge of the road, which forces these avid runners and walkers to walk on the road amongst the traffic. I could spend a significant amount of time talking about the traffic and poor lighting conditions along Cockshut and Dover Mills, but I will not. I will simply ask that you consider these as contributing factors to the extremely unsafe walking conditions members of your community face. To speak to the isolation aspect, there are several young families in our subdivision who love to walk outdoors with little ones in a stroller, and as they get older, pull them in a wagon. I can tell you firsthand, as a regularly strong individual, how difficult it is to push a stroller or pull a wagon on the uneven gravel shoulder of Cockshut or traveling down the narrow roads at Dover Mills. Therefore, a new mom or dad who may want to walk downtown for a coffee, visit our market, or simply explore more than just the street they live on, may find themselves feeling isolated, as traveling out of our subdivision can be a daunting and treacherous task that few are willing to take on. Furthermore, and on a personal note, my wife was a daily 5K runner who was forced to stop running as a result of a spinal injury where she underwent emergency surgery 2 years ago. My wife ended up losing a significant amount of feeling in her leg, and as she recovered, she was eventually allowed to walk further distances outdoors on paved surfaces for exercise. For someone who went for daily 5K runs throughout Port Dover to being limited to our tiny subdivision, she can attest that, limited to our tiny subdivision because there are no surrounding sidewalks, she can attest that the isolation can weigh on a person both physically and mentally. Since then, many of our fellow neighbors have said the same thing as they recover from various surgeries like hip and knee replacements. There are also residents who require motorized scooters and wheelchairs who are affected by the lack of a sidewalk. There's absolutely zero chance of them using the gravel shoulder of Cockshut for fear that they might tip over or get stuck in the loose gravel, and traveling down Dover Mills can be just as dangerous. Sorry for the poor drawing. I'm just trying to represent my family, my 2 children biking up ahead, my wife and I walking behind them, and a car approaching and a car behind us. The reason why I'm here today and what finally prompted me to take action is due to a frightening incident that took place in the spring of 2018 with my children. After dinner, we went out on our usual family walk, though this time my 6 and 8-year-old asked to ride their bikes. We've been over bike safety several times, and my children know to stay at a reasonable distance ahead of us when biking at the edge of the road when a sidewalk isn't available. Near the end of a walk, a car was approaching us from the west as we were traveling east on Dover Mills Road back to our subdivision. At the same time, a car who was traveling the same direction as my family passed my wife and I on the narrow road of Dover Mills and was speeding up to attempt to pass our children before the oncoming car reached them. It was obvious that there wasn't enough time or space for this car to pass our children safely, but the driver was determined to make it. We watched in disbelief, not wanting to yell and cause our kids to swerve in the path of the vehicle as this car sped towards them. It wasn't until the last moment that the car slammed on the brakes directly behind our children to allow the oncoming car to pass. We felt very lucky that day as we were almost witness to a tragic accident. Our kids were doing everything we had taught them while riding bikes on the road, and they were still almost hit by an impatient driver. I'm a strong believer in not complaining about how things should be, but taking positive action to create change. I phoned City Hall to see what department I needed to contact, and I wrote a letter to the Public Works Department, our former Ward 6 Councillor John Wells, as well as the former Mayor Charlie Luke. Mr. Luke was quick to respond and receptive to my letter, and through several back and forth emails, he arranged to come to my house for a meeting along with Mr. Wells to discuss my concerns. At the meeting, I showed them pictures of my family as well as other families walking on the shoulder of Cockshut to get to our downtown on Friday the 13th. I offered to go for a walk with Mr. Luke and Mr. Wells along with my children so they could see firsthand how dangerous the walk actually was. Mr. Luke declined the Luke and said that he was aware of the area and that was a known issue that should have been addressed years ago. He suggested that I write a formal proposal which was submitted and included on the agenda of the August 28, 2018 council meeting. Mr. Luke also suggested that I wait to discuss my proposal with City Council until the fall, as there may be some changes during the upcoming municipal election. In addition, a writer from the Port Dover Maple Leaf newspaper wrote an article on my proposal, which was followed by letters to the paper from residents pleased that I brought this forward to council and echoing my concerns. I talked with Ms. Martin about the proposal of a sidewalk while she was campaigning in our area, and I've kept in contact with her since becoming our new Ward 6 councillor. Ms. Martin took the time to connect me to the right people so that my deputation could be heard today before the 2019 council budget was approved, and I'm here to thank her for all her help. My wife and I pride ourselves on being active members in our community. We truly love this town, and we couldn't be happier raising our children here. We do our best to try and help our community by coaching various athletic teams for myself and my wife by heavily volunteering in various programs at our children's school. I'm here to ask for your help to better our neighborhood by creating a safe place to travel out of the Pine Ridge Estate subdivision. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to formally propose a sidewalk along Cockshut from Dover Mills Road to where the existing sidewalk ends at Ryerson Crescent. I would also like to propose a second sidewalk on Dover Mills Road from Angler to Prospect. I understand that the construction of the sidewalk can be expensive, therefore a second alternative would be to create a paved shoulder with painted cement barriers as seen on Highway 6 by No Frills. These last two pictures show where the sidewalks are currently located in our neighborhood, and finally, what they would look like if the sidewalks I'm proposing are created. As you can see from the map, this would not only vastly improve the safety for residents who live in the area, but also create a sense of connectivity for members of our subdivision to neighboring areas of our community. While Shel Silverstein speaks of a tranquil, calm place where a sidewalk ends, the reality of ours is much bleaker. A proper sidewalk to connect our neighborhood and community would vastly improve the physical and mental well-being of many. Mayor Chop, Norfolk Council members, distinguished guests, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any questions from council members? Councilor Martin.
That was great. Thank you, Wade. I'm wondering if you've had any conversations with the neighboring, don't ask me which direction.
I'll try and show you on the map.
Sunninghill,
Here,
Inglewood.
I'm going to go previous. So the Inglewood subdivision is in where this mouse is right now.
Right.
That whole subdivision borders onto Cockshut right here, and many of the members, I have personal friends that are in there. My kids have friends that they play with in there, and right now we're forced to drive them one or two streets over just because it's not a safe walk to go on. The subdivision over here, which is Forestwood, also has many sidewalks that go to Dover. I'm going to go back to the previous one here. So this is the current sidewalks. This is Forestwood Drive. They have sidewalks that end at Dover Mills, which leads to nowhere. Over here, and Inglewood has no sidewalks that lead to anywhere. In Pine Ridge Estates, we have two sidewalks that lead to absolutely nowhere. It's old country roads, and it's a highway. It's extremely busy, it's extremely unsafe, and many of the neighboring communities would benefit from it. And yes, the ones that I've talked to in that think that it should have been done long ago.
That's great. And I wonder if, or would you be able to just estimate at the additional homes in that other neighboring, just ballpark?
In our small area here, there was 130 houses. I would say there's probably at least 200 houses here and probably an additional 100 to 150 houses here.
Right, so it's not just about the 130 homes in your area to
No.
be able to build on.
It's about the neighboring community. It's about the avid runners and walkers who go through our town, who are currently running along the shoulder of Cockshut and then down Dover Mills. Port Dover's expanding, and that's just the reality. And we just need to be the new part. Any new part that's being built in Port Dover should be connected to the old part of Port Dover. There needs to be a sense of connectivity. There needs to be a safe road of travel for those who are running, for walking, pushing kids in strollers, for the elderly who use wheelchairs, electric scooters to get around. And right now there's not. You see people that are running on the shoulder of Cockshut and then traveling down the narrow road of Dover Mills, and there's not enough room for two cars to pass with people walking. It's an old country road. It's just the reality of it. There's very little lighting in the area. It's a dangerous place. We need a safe place to travel.
Thank you.
Councilor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have a question for staff. A couple of years ago, the sewer mains were updated on the east side of the Cockshut, weren't they?
Through the mayor, Councillor, there's new storm sewers that were put in on that east side in the ditch line that drain off to the ravine at the north limit of town.
Yeah, 'cause, that's what I was hoping that was complete. I'd hate to put in sidewalks and have to rip them out to fix something else, but pretty sure that got done already. So, and I agree with the delegation that that's long overdue on that road. So.
Councillor Hoffman.
Thank you. Just a couple quick, I just want to confirm. There are no street lights at all along Cockshut, correct?
On Cockshut, there are probably a few street lights between the old sidewalk where Rossi Crescent, where it ends, up to Dover Mills. From Dover Mills to our subdivision, there are 0 street lights. From the corner of Dover Mills and Cockshut east to Inglewood, there are 0 street lights. From Doverwood and Cockshut intersection down towards Prospect, there's probably approximately 6 lights between the Cockshut and the first stop sign, and 1 or 2 lights between the next stop sign and Prospect. It's very dark.
So a concern is not just the safety of not having a safe pathway, it's also unlit, right? So it would
There
be
are a lot
extremely
of things I
dangerous.
could discuss about this and that. For me, it's baby steps.
Yeah.
First thing I think we need is a sidewalk to have a safe path for when it is light. But yeah, 5:30 right now, it's pitch black. It's when you're going from Cockshut on Dover Mills towards Inglewood, you're down a dark country road. There isn't one light.
Okay. And I just wanted to expand on your previous discussions with the former mayor and the former councillor of Ward 6. And you had mentioned that there was a comment that something should have been done about this a long time ago. So was there any kind of historic reason that you were given as to why this hadn't already occurred, or?
The only story I got, and it wasn't, sorry, I'm just going to click forward so you can see where the sidewalk ends. So the sidewalk at Ryerson Crescent, I was told the only reason that was installed was because somebody was hit and killed there years ago.
Oh.
It took an incident like that for something to finally put a sidewalk in. I was told that's the only reason that happened. There are 2 subdivisions that were built before mine. Sometimes council puts the onus on the builder to provide a sidewalk to connect the old part of the subdivision to new parts of the subdivision. I don't know why that wasn't done, but it wasn't. And said we're a newer subdivision that is completely isolated from the rest. And I'm told that this farmland right here, that's going to be designated for new build as well. And so you're going to have even more people in the area who would require a sidewalk for safe travel.
Okay. And I just wanted to add, great job on the deputation, and I fully agree that in order for active transportation, active living, and connection to your community, I completely agree with
Thank you.
that. Thanks.
Any further questions? Councillor Columbus.
Yes, Mr. Mclean, thank you for coming forward with this community issue. And you've taken us back to August of last year. A lot of times, I know in the past, we get petitions signed by residents in the neighborhood. Has there ever been a petition presented to staff or anybody?
No, there hasn't been a petition
No.
presented in that. To me, when I'm looking at this, we're completely isolated, and to me, it's common sense. I can very well go around and see all 130 houses in my neighborhood, as well as all of Inglewood, and as well as Forestwood. And I believe I'm going to get the majority of support. I don't think there's one person I would talk to who would think it's a bad idea to provide a safe means of travel for themselves as well as family members in the area.
Normally, the main reason people object to signing a petition would be because they'd have to clean the sidewalk
Okay.
with respect to the county public works bylaw. So from what I see here, are there very many homes that would front onto this sidewalk?
That's probably the best part. Along Cockshut, there's one house down by Ryerson Crescent that, depending on where you go, if you stop the sidewalk where the mouse is now and then come across this part here, there isn't one house that would be affected. If you go along Dover Mills on the east side, there's one small farmhouse here, and then there's 2 houses at the end here on the north side of the street along Dover Mills towards Inglewood. These are all just the back of homes. There isn't one frontage that goes on there. It's
Okay, through the mayor, are you recommending the sidewalk be located on the north side of that Dover Mills or the south side?
I would recommend the north side because fewer people are affected by that, but that I don't feel that's my decision to make. Our planning department would have to look at that to see where sewers are, to see where logistics are, and where the best place for that to be.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
If I, through the chair, if I may speak to Councillor Columbus's inquiry about a petition, when I was door knocking in all of those areas, that was a reoccurring common theme with residents looking for a safe means to travel downtown and back and forth. We know we have a parking issue downtown Port Dover in peak seasons. Many people are keen to walk or ride their bike downtown, but don't feel as though it's safe. I met a lady who fell off her bike and suffered a severe concussion due to hitting her head on the gravel pathway, and so on and so forth. I know there's also another letter that has been submitted to the clerk that we will probably see a little bit later, it may have been late, in support of this proposal. That individual lives in the Inglewood subdivision, not Wade subdivision. And additionally, as a young child, I previously lived in that neighborhood, and to and from work at the age of 15, 16, I used to have to walk up and down that gravel side. So I can speak to many residents in that neighborhood who would be in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, the Cockshut was always a major arterial road. It was a regional road. All the subdivisions are, they call them internal subdivisions. The houses don't front onto it. So the sidewalk would be the responsibility of the county. And again, for connectivity, it is long overdue. On Dover Mills Road, we could probably work with the developers in the future on that to have a sidewalk put in place, but you know, we're on the hook for this one no matter how we look at it, right?
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Okay, I just need a mover and a seconder to receive the deputation as information. Moved by Councillor Martin and seconded by Councillor Huffman. Was that a hand? Yes. Okay. All in favor? And that's carried. So I believe next we are going to turn back to the rate-supported operating budget from where we left off.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a
Councillor
question of
Columbus, of
staff
course.
with respect to the sidewalk, please?
Absolutely. My apologies.
Okay, to Mr. Baird, who's here. As was mentioned by Mr. Councilor Van Passen, would it be the developer's obligation to put a sidewalk on the north side of Dover Mills Road? Is that common?
Through the mayor, that area that Mr. Mclean had mentioned, and Councillor Van Passen is aware, is what we call Dover Mills North. It's the next growth area, along with Dover Coast and Dover West. This is one of the targeted areas, and we would most definitely be requiring not only sidewalks within that subdivision that meet the policy, but that connectivity along Dover Mills. And it would make sense that if the developer owns the lands that front on the north side, that would be most likely where the sidewalk would go, but I wouldn't want to preempt that. That would go through the normal circulation process. The current Cockshut Road, those subdivisions were developed back in the 1990s, and there were different standards. The councils of the day, whether they chose to accept sidewalks or not. It is a rural cross-section, and Mr. Mclean did make mention of sort of an interim solution, which may be cost-effective, and that's which goes along Highway 6 by the no frills when you're coming into Dover, maybe more asphalt. The problem you have on the Cockshut Road is it's a rural cross-section. You've got ditch line, you've got a lot of cross-slope gravel shoulders. To put in, a permanent sidewalk, concrete sidewalk, it may end up getting pulled out at some point in the future when that section of roadway comes up for full rebuild, and that would have an urban cross-section, so curb and gutter, sidewalk, the sort of thing that you'd see in town. This is purely a section of road where the community has continued to grow beyond the former limits. So this is not an uncommon situation, and I think this is indicative in any ward where you've got growth on the periphery of an urban area. We need to have regard for connections for active transportation, as was outlined. We fully support that. It is just a matter of timing and cost and what council just decides to do.
And further, this is a two-lane road. Cockshot and Dover Mills. So who would be responsible for clearing the snow and ice, the winter works on this?
Yeah, good question, Councillor. Through the mayor, as Mr. Van Passen is aware, he knows, he's very familiar with our operations. If the sidewalk traverses the front of a residential property, currently we require that abutting landowner to look after that section. But in a case like this where it's back reverse frontage, it's rather difficult for people to walk around the block to do their section. We would be recommending that that would be added to the county sections to be cleared. And again, because of the broader, higher traffic, higher speed limits and so on that type of roadway.
Councilor Martin. Oh, sorry.
Madam
sorry,
Mayor,
Councilor.
I think I would like to see a detailed report from staff on this
Okay.
as to the issues and when it could be brought back here for further consideration.
Councilor Martin, I guess we'll put that forward as a motion,
Sure.
and we'll just finish with the questions first. Does that work? Okay.
I was
Councilor
going
Martin.
to speak to protocol on moving the project forward and receiving more information, so that's fine. Thank you.
I have one quick question myself first. I know I often speak sort of against site plan control and so on. However, I do believe that there is an appropriate time for it, and with development, housing development, and that sort of thing, I believe it's entirely appropriate so that municipalities aren't left holding the bag with sidewalks and with lighting and so on. Now, I know we have a bylaw in place that requires that developers put sidewalks within their communities, but I also believe it is possible to require them. Now, this happened many years previously, but it is possible to require them in the future when communities are built sort of on the edge of town to also provide that connectivity to town. Would that not be fair to say?
It's hard to go after a developer after an agreement's been executed.
Oh, no,
but-
sorry. I don't mean in this particular instance. Obviously,
Okay.
that's not the case. I just mean in the future when we start looking at new subdivisions on the edge of town, on the periphery of town, to ensure that moving forward, connectivity to the central core is also provided by the
Exactly, yes,
developers.
Mayor Chop, that's a great comment. That's what we would use development charges for. If we'd identify at some point in the future, we need to build this missing piece, we don't want the ratepayer to pay for it. Development should pay for, or growth should pay for growth, and that would be along what you're stating. So.
Okay, so Councillor Columbus, would you like to put a motion on the floor? Okay, and then I need a seconder. Councillor Taylor? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Councillor Hoffman?
I just wanted to know if that request includes including street lighting.
Just considering the sidewalk, but when we're approaching the developer for a sidewalk on Dover Mills, I think it's customary for overhead streetlights to be included there.
Okay, but if we're looking at just adding a sidewalk in regards to the area that Mr. Mclean was talking about, is there any way to kind of get a two-price?
I will leave that to Mr. Baird.
Okay.
If he can
Mayor Chop,
perhaps
I
comment
think
on
that's
that.
a great opportunity to do that. I will take that as your direction. We'll provide an estimate for street lighting,
Okay.
and you can make those decisions when you have all that information before you. We'll do our best to get something back to you at the earliest opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Martin?
Additionally, are we able to ask staff to provide a date or a rough estimate as to when we could expect that to return to council?
Mayor Chop, I would suggest sometime in late March. There's the first couple of weeks our council has a break, but if I could target late March, that would give us sufficient time to do the work that needs to be done to calculate out costs and run it through our report process for comments so we can get it to you. If that's acceptable, I will most definitely do so.
Thank
I
you.
think that's fair, given the budgets and everything that's going on. Councillor Hoffman?
Additionally, are we able to ask staff to provide a date or a rough estimate as to when we could expect that to return to council?
Um,
Are we able to ask staff to provide a date or a rough estimate as to when we could expect that to return to council?
Mr. Clerk, would you be able to add that to our to-do list for late March to come back when we have that notification? One more question I just had myself, Mr. Baird, was in terms of who is going to prepare this estimate for the report? This will be staff preparing this estimate, or this is something that would be contracted out?
Mayor Chop, this is something that we are most capable of doing in-house.
In-house, perfect, thanks. Okay, any further questions on the sidewalk issue? No. So I will turn it back over to you guys for the rate budget.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Where we left off yesterday, we were going to start on page 3-4, and on 3-4 is an overall summary of our water and wastewater rate requirements. As a result of yesterday's motion to freeze the holding tank and the septic tank rates, we have to adjust the rate requirement by $30,900. So the ratepayers will have that extra amount that will be billed to them.
So yesterday, I believe the figure that you gave us was 22,000.
The figure that I gave you was just the holding tank, and when the motion was finally passed, the septic got snuck in. So as a result, there's an extra $7,300 from freezing that rate as well. The original conversation was just the holding tank. However, when the motion was brought forward, it stated the holding tank and the septic tank rates.
Okay, so 30,900 is the
Correct.
difference. Okay.
So I also want to let council know that with the rate budget, the rates that are calculated for the homeowners and the commercial and industrial owners, it's a calculation in what we call it a rate model. And a rate model is a fairly complicated spreadsheet that's provided to us by the consultant in order to calculate exactly what the volumetric rate is versus the fixed rate, because as you can imagine, to try to put all that together with the volumes and offsetting the miscellaneous revenues and so on and so forth, there's a systematic process to do that. So when we make adjustments today, unfortunately, we won't be able to let you know what the rate impact is until Kathy has about an hour or two to make sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed in order to give you those numbers. The last thing I want to do is let you know what the rate impact is without us double checking it. Conversely, when we do the operating budget in a week and a half, we have a system set up where we can do that in real time, and the only reason why we can do that is just it's a different animal. Doing a tax rates calculation is just it's a different way of doing it than rates for water and wastewater. So so however we make adjustments today, we will try to do it as soon as we can back to council on what the rate impact is. However, unfortunately, that is not a real-time service that we can offer at this time. On page 3-4, just to let you know, this format.
Could I just ask a question? You know, the evil people on holding tanks are going to add $30,000 to the budget, and we have to readjust it and all that. At some point, we're going to discuss some of the consultant's report where there's several $100,000 worth of savings to offset that $30,000 charge.
As we go through these pages, those will turn, like those will come out and we can discuss them at that time. So what we plan on doing is going through the pages in the budget document, and you can see so if you look at page 3-4, there's several columns there. There's the 2018 forecasted actuals. Now keep in mind the word forecasted, I can't stress that enough. These are unaudited numbers. We have over 300 working papers that we do as a year-end process, and as we do those working papers through that reconciliation process, there's the only thing I can guarantee is that there will be changes to those numbers, because when we put these numbers together, obviously the year-end wasn't done yet, and there's a couple months of forecasts in there. And then we have last year's approved budget in the green column, and then the 2019 adjusted budget, and we phrase that as our base budget, correct? Business as usual, yes. And then the next two columns, we have council approved initiatives. Council approved is pretty much what it says. It's initiatives that have been dealt with throughout 2018 that we were directed to include in the 2019 budget. The new budget initiatives are initiatives that we're bringing forward to you today to consider. And the last green column is a total of the business as usual plus the council approved initiatives and the new budget initiatives. And then the second last column is the dollar amount change, and then of course the percentage change. So the very last 2.9% is what you saw yesterday in the slideshow. So that's an overall summary of the water and wastewater, and if you'd go to page 3-5, I'll turn the mic over to Kathy, and she can sort of walk us through. And usually we go to the pages, and if council has any questions about any particular numbers, either if it's finance related, we can definitely answer them. However, anything operating, my colleagues across the room can answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. Going back to what James was talking about, I just wanted to point out on 3-4, he mentioned the adjusted budget. I just want to mention, I didn't say in my slide yesterday, that if you look at the change for the adjusted budget, it works out to 1.3%. So of the 2.9%, the budget that the department has actually gone through, and they scrubbed all their accounts, looked where they could find some efficiencies and savings, reviewed their user fee charges. The increase is a proposed 1.3% on that side of it. And if we move to page 3.5, it's the water administration budget. And again, Public Works and Environmental Services or ourselves can answer any questions if you have any particular questions related to any of these line items. Just the way that the water and wastewater administration, these are all the costs associated that are both for water, wastewater, it's related to administration. And what we do is we take the actual, you'll notice that the net levy requirement is 0 for the administration. We add up all the costs and any offsetting revenues related to administration, and then allocate it to the appropriate budget, water and wastewater actual budgets, based on the percentage of the actual budget for water and for wastewater. So if anyone has any questions, we can, on that page, we can, okay. Yeah. It's up to you.
So just what's better for you, if we start with those items, or maybe just go through the user fees first?
Our preference is to go through these pages first.
Okay.
And then we can speak of it's sort of the order of the booklet, if you will. And because the user fees are the second appendix, I believe. Yeah, so, and that would be a good time to speak on those.
Okay. I guess the first motion that I would like to put on the floor is or I have to pass the chair to Ms. Martin, is to remove the new council initiative of the $35,000 that in my view falls more appropriately under planning and development charges if it's being used by developers. And so we can address that at a later date. So the motion would be to remove the new council initiative of $35,000. And you can, I'll allow you, you can carry it on.
Seconder. Counselor Rabbits. And all in favor? Discussion?
Oh, discuss.
Sorry, discussion?
Through you, Madam Chair. So in this instance, the mayor has passed the chair off to the deputy mayor. Our procedural bylaw doesn't speak in great depth to this, but the Robert's Rules of Orders go in a lot more detail. So there's some general principles just around the ideal of remaining impartial as the chair and in presiding. So some of the ideas are that if the chair is relinquished, it should be relinquished until the vote is completed in all instances. Also, you shouldn't be relinquishing, if you're going to accept the chair, you shouldn't have previously debated the item. So if the deputy mayor or vice chair of CIC has been active in the debate about that particular item, they should look for another council member to take the chair. And those are the main ideals within Robert's rules, kind of to paraphrase them. So just to ensure that it's impartial.
Mr. Clerk, could you clarify the way we should be operating? Or is it right for the mayor to put a motion on the floor immediately? I'm trying to grasp that because I don't understand it.
I think it's generally, in Robert's rules, it's generally described as something that's very rare, that it should be used sparingly. So I think that's the nature of what you're getting at. Within that, usually you could do it both at the start, or you could allow the debate to go through and have everybody speak, and then relinquish the chair and put forward a motion. So there's really two options to do it. But the important thing is that if you're taking a position in it, that you relinquish the chair for the whole item to somebody who hasn't taken a strong position on it.
Mayor Chop.
Councillor Columbus, if I'm obviously this is my first time with the budget proceeding, so I am more than willing if somebody, I thought we were going to go through the user fees first and come back to all these other items that we had discussed yesterday. I'm happy to proceed and whatever. I just was trying to get the discussion moving along so we start moving through this and addressing some of the items that we had touched on. But if you have a suggestion, I'm...
My understanding through experience is the fact that all councillors, people around the table, get the opportunity to discuss the items, and then the chair, or in your case the mayor, speaks last to the issue. That's the way I've understood it, and that's the way I operate the committee meetings. But I'm trying to get some direction from the clerk because I've never heard of it happening this way.
And again, I'm fine to step back, and if you guys want to raise the items, I just thought we had discussed them yesterday. We discussed the new council initiatives. We had raised all these issues already. So in hindsight, I had regretted us not pushing each of those items further at that time, but now that we were revisiting that at this point this morning,
Maybe I'll refer to the clerk here for some direction now that the chair has been passed. Best option to proceed, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. So there is a motion on the floor right now that's been properly moved and seconded, so I'd suggest dealing with the motion that's before you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Chop, would you be able to repeat the motion for me? for all of us.
That the new council initiative of 35,000 be removed from the rate budget.
And it's seconded properly? Yeah, okay. So a vote, all in favor?
Oh, discussion, I think. if you
Sorry,
want.
discussion. Councillor Rabbit.
I want to provide rationale as to why I seconded the motion that was put forward. In my opinion, this is a cost that should be included in 2019 operating levy budget. This is a tool that is used by multiple departments, and it is to the benefit of developers in general in Norfolk County, and that's why I believe it's more appropriate placed into that budget rather than having it contained within our rates.
Any further discussion? Councillor Columbus?
Did you hear me? Okay.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Columbus, or actually through you, Councillor Martin, to Councillor Columbus. The nature of that new initiative, and perhaps Mr. Baird could expand on it a little bit. Our understanding when we were putting this budget together was more related to rate. However, if there's an argument that it could be related to the tax levy, we could move it to there as well. But I'll pass it over to Mr. Baird on sort of the background of the new initiative and why we included it here.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Council, Mayor Chop, so the purpose of this project is, in my opinion, should remain in the rate area. The reason being, it's money used directly to evaluate the pipe conditions and their capacity, their ability to convey. It's of no other benefit to those water users, wastewater users. Not the general taxpayers, those that would live in the rural area as an example. So the purpose of these funds are for us to continue modeling how our existing infrastructure works. When we have new developers that come online, they look to our sewer models, our water and sewer modeling, to see how their development is going to impact. So by us owning the work, we make it available to the developers or their consultants, and they pay for that. We actually recover a cost. So I know Mayor Chop expressed a good comment about, we shouldn't be paying for this if the developers are benefiting. They are actually contributing when they have to submit in their development applications. There's water and sewer modeling that goes with that. So all the capital projects that you see, all the roads that we're rebuilding and the pipes, we use this modeling to make sure when we rebuild Colburn Street, as an example, right out front, next year or the year after, that the pipes that are in the ground, using the sewer modeling, we know an 8-inch water main is sufficient, or do we have to go to a 10-inch or something like that? So it's about anticipating what we have in the ground and how it will interrelate to other development that will eventually flow through. Councillor Martin is a good example. We had a discussion last week. Radical Road is a real pinch point for servicing the Dover West community, because everything will eventually flow through those existing pipes to the wastewater treatment plant. So before we rebuild Radical Road, we want to make sure through this sewer modeling that, do we need an 8-inch pipe? Do we need a 10? Do we need a 2-foot pipe? Sorry to use imperial, but that's the type of, those are the reasons why we would do this modeling. If you would like to, and believe me, I'm a water and sewer user too, but I would put forward a recommendation if you'd like to cut that by by half or otherwise, to leave a little bit of money there that we can continue on doing some of those targeted areas, and we can reevaluate that in time. But to answer your question, Councillor Rabbits, I would recommend it staying in the rate budget because it directly impacts those that are serviced through that infrastructure.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. A question to the mover and seconder. Do you want to remove from this budget, or are you looking at where to get the money to pay for it? Would it be rational to say that we want to fund it out of the development charges reserve and add a line on the revenue end of the column of where we're getting the money for that. 'Cause
To the
I agree with Mr. Baird's comments. It's, the need is in that department, that section, but it's where we're going to get the money. Can we pull it from the development charges reserve to fund that 35,000?
To the chair, I would be amenable to that. My challenge with this is when I asked yesterday, it specifically states, staff feels there is an added value to the development community, and my problem is that I don't believe that ratepayers should be paying for something that is an added value to the development community. There was no discussion of what the actual ROI is on this new council initiative, and in my own view on new council initiatives, that information should be provided to us. If there isn't an ROI, then we have to, it begs the question, why are we doing this? I guess my other question would be, where also, when I asked yesterday, there was no answer that was offered as to where the charges that are being, the county has also been offering charged back to the developer at our costs to have the consultant run the model. I don't see a line item in this budget anywhere that speaks to that money, that income that's being brought in from this initiative. So where is the money going from this when it is charged back to our developers?
Madam Mayor, that's a great observation. We put our heads together during a break last evening. The fee that's being sought is $35,000. Depending on the development activity and the need for them to access our modeling information, we recover that cost. So if we're to, what's shown here perhaps should be, we should be showing a gross cost, let's say $35,000, and if we recover $5,000 or $10,000, the net cost that should be in the budget should be a figure less than 35. You're right. We're not showing any recoveries on that table, and perhaps we should be.
Correct. And like anything, in my view, we have user fees, and whether that's an hourly charge to a developer or so on, there should be a fixed rate. It shouldn't just be discretionary in the case of staff. One developer pays this, one developer pays this. It should be a published rate that all are subjected to if they use that service. And so when I don't see a line item that shows that cost recovery, that's a little bit troubling to me, when there's zero ROI and our ratepayers are paying that. Now, I do, through the chair to Councillor Van Passen, if it was funded from the development charges, that in that case would make sense to me.
Councillor Van Passen.
Well, then, following up on Mr. Baird's comment, would it be fair to leave it up at the top, put a line item for $30,000 to be funded from the development charges reserve and $5,000 from user fees or fee for service? Does that seem reasonable or even legal?
James, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, development charges are for capital-related projects. That's what we use them for funding. Anything that's operational, there's very few exceptions, and I don't believe that this would be able to be funded through DCs because it's strictly an operational item.
Mayor Chop.
To Mr. Baird, what did we do? This was just started in 2018. What did we do before we started this modeling program?
We simply didn't. This is critical for us. It ties in directly with our servicing capacity and just the development growth. Normally, we knew the pipes that were in the ground and development up through the 80s and 90s and early 2000s was fairly flat and level. And now we're seeing major subdivision developments, 100, 200, 300 lots being proposed. And that's starting to put pressures on our ability to provide water and collect wastewater. through existing systems.
But see, you just said it again. You just said development, it's critical for development. And this is where I still struggle. This should not be a fee that's imposed on ratepayers. As we grow our communities, that shouldn't be up to the person that's paying their water bill to fund new development in the community.
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, the new developers are paying to use our model, but as that growth, as the new systems connect into our existing systems, when we go through our capital budget and we look at all the road projects that we're doing, if we need to use modeling to determine is the infrastructure in the ground adequate to accommodate that coming in, or should we be upsizing it and perhaps using development charges to pay for that upsizing when we do the road rebuilding. So it's just a better management tool. It's certainly standard now with all progressive municipalities. You'd hate to